looking into your faces because your faces need looking into. Now, I think we're going to talk about comics, film, music. And as Jack said, if we have a little time left over, maybe there'll be a Q&A along the way, so where should we start?
Well, I'd like to start from the beginning. I'd love to hear the origins of creators, of artists, and I'd like to take it back. It's something that blows my mind is that you flunked high school art. Is that correct? Is that you failed that? And then,
That's true.
what happened after? Did something like that actually light a fire in your belly to actually refine your skills, or did you take a break for a while and then find a love for art again?
Well, no, the part you didn't know is why I failed.
Why? Yeah.
I had, in 11th grade, I had an art teacher. His name was Mr. Dornsife. And we were up on the second or third floor of this school. And he had, in art class, sometimes they have like blocks, and shapes that you draw, to learn how light and shadow affects elements, objects. And at least once a week, and maybe twice a week, this box full of these wooden blocks would be hurled out the window onto the kids that were, passing by underneath at the time. This mysterious thing went on like for a couple of weeks, and finally, Mr. Dornsife called me over and he said, "I'd like to make a deal with you. I'm going to put you in the back of the room. You do whatever you want. If you want to draw, fine. If you want to do your English homework, your math homework, you do whatever you want. You take the last seat. I'm going to give you an A or a 95 or whatever it was throughout the whole year. You think maybe we can cooperate?" And after that moment, those blocks never left the room. Now that was in 11th grade. That was my 11th grade art class. And I did art. I used to sit back in the back of the class and draw. In my 12th year, I had this art teacher named Miss Love.
Was she as good as she sounded? I mean, well, you're already saying no.
Nobody could live up to that. And she hated me. But the feeling may have been mutual. For example, they had me on the yearbook staff. I submitted my art. She took that art, gave it to somebody else to recreate. You see what I mean? It was just an unfair situation. And I remember this incident because we had a class project to recreate a record album jacket, class project. And I chose Spellbound, one of my favorite movies, that Rosa score. And I painted up in tempera my own version, if somebody would have hired me to create the Spellbound album art. And I remember I did kind of unusual lettering because the material itself almost required a unique handling of the typography. You got me? It's kind of spooky. Instead of just printing regular whatever it was, it needed something special, and I did. And I remember she came over and looked at it, and she was deeply offended by this expressive lettering. And she tore the art to shreds right in front of the whole class, threw it in the wastebasket. So I failed art in high school. But I've always had an interest in art. And as a matter of fact, maybe I'll tell you this story. My mother mentioned this years ago. She said, "You made some noise in the comic business, but do you know how early you were reading comics? And I said, then I was probably there, but I can't quite remember. She said, you learned to read by reading comic books. Now, you know, when we learn to read, you know, we get these books like A is for apple, B is for ball, you know. I didn't have any. I had a very poor background. It was a little matchbox house. Cold, poor, hungry, poor. And I remember my uncle, Gene, would bring over shopping bags full of used comic books that I loved as a kid. I was just a baby. And I'd sit in my mother's lap, and I'd point to the balloons, because I knew when I did that she would tell me what the characters were saying. And eventually, that's how I learned to read. Now, I wasn't sure I really believed that story. That's reading really early. And then my mother gave me her baby book, you know, the baby book. And it was all written in there, it was all confirmed. So I grew up with comics in my blood, okay? And the first drawing I remember doing was, I started kindergarten when I was, I think, 4 years old. And I remember drawing on, with chalk on the cement block right in front of the sidewalk, right in front of the school entrance. Jap Zeros being shot down by American Warhawks. You know, with bullets from this plane, you know, hits this one, begins to smoke, and that one shooting down another one. You know, I remember drawing, that's the first drawing I ever remember making in my life, 4 years old. I think I saw it on eBay last week.
Did you buy it?
Too expensive for me.
You mentioned how you were, your love for comics started at an early age, and I was watching an interview that you did, and it's always been Captain America that you've been drawn to, and it also explains a certain theme that you put into your comic books, which has been the patriotic theme. Is it still Captain America?
When I was a little kid, Captain America was my favorite hero. When I was drawing him, he was my favorite hero, and to this very day, Captain America is still my quintessential hero. And I think I may have set a record somewhere along the way for creating more patriotic covers, maybe than anybody else. I use that theme frequently, and still do, as a matter of fact.
And plus also the death of Captain America is something that you did first, is that right?
I think I did that back in 1967 or 8, something like that. Yeah, the death of Captain America. And I'll tell you why I did it, Jack. Captain America was really treading water at the time. They, the powers at Marvel, had revealed his secret identity. And why wear a mask if everybody knows who the hell you are? I didn't know, it didn't make sense anymore. And the strip was suffering at the time. And I said, look, let's clean house and start all over again. And Stan said, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, we'll do it the most natural and dramatic way we can. Let's kill him off and start from scratch. And I think that may have been the first of the death of major superheroes.
So that's before Captain Marvel, before Superman, of course, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
As a rock DJ, Jim, this really struck my fancy, and I brought this up right away when I met you. And again, coming up as a kid, we talked about you graduating from high school, and somewhere along the lines when you were becoming a magician and escape artist, when you were honing your craft for that, and I'd like to brush up on that, I'd like to talk about that in just a minute here, and also becoming a prolific artist. You got to play with Bill Haley, and this is something I'd like to thank you with. You're responsible for putting the first ever Go-Go Girls on stage. First, thank you for that, by the way. Yes. If you were here at the burlesque show, it's kind of partial to this guy also, okay? Last night. Please, can you talk about that a little bit? Were you one of the Comets at first? The original Comets?
No. Actually, they weren't the Comets. First, there were a number of groups, but I think I may have run across Bill when it was Bill Haley and the Saddle Men. Bill changed sidemen and names frequently. I mean, he was always looking for something that worked. And the reason that I played with Bill, and you know what I mean, Bill had like Rock Around the Clock, you know, which arguably may be one of the first, you know, rock and roll tunes ever, but certainly was the biggest hit. The first of the biggest hits, am I right?
No, you're correct. Yes, Rock Around the Clock.
What would you say is what would you call the first rock and roll tune?
Oh, jeez, I'd have to go with maybe Little Richard is in there, probably. I'd have to say.
It's Rocket 88.
Yeah?
Oh. Ike Turner, right?
Ike, yeah.
Right, that's correct.
You should have my job, yeah. 7 to midnight.
Anyway, Bill lived about, I don't know, 10, 12 miles from where I lived, so our paths crossed frequently. We played in the same stages. You know, this is a remarkable thing, I just remembered this. One evening, Bill came over and he said, and he kind of had a sense of what I did, that I was a graphic designer, you know, by day and a rock and roller at night. And he said, come over to the truck, I have something over here to show you. What could this be about? And he opened the door, and there were a series of wooden, carved, one-of-a-kind, wooden, you know, I'm looking for this word, like dies. In other words, they were what is used to print letterpress posters. You know, usually it's type, it's like cold type or something like that, you know, that bang. But these were all carved by hand. And Bill said, I don't want to haul these around anymore. He said, do you have any use for them? Because he knew I was a designer. And I said, sure, why not? And I put them in the trunk of my car and put them away. But to this very day, I have Bill's original poster, you know, the original poster, you know, printing material, including one that's easily this square. Printed huge posters. Bill, actually was Bill's, one of his guitar players that recommended the first real guitar that I had, except his name was Fran Beecher. Does that ring a bell? Fran Beecher? You know Fran?
I've heard of him.
Okay, he was the guy during that period. He was a former orchestra guitarist, and he moved back to Philly, which was his home, and then got involved with the Comets. But Fran played a Gretsch, and he wanted me to play a Gretsch. And I remember this day because at Charlie Richards' music store, while I was in the store, somebody brought in a Les Paul, what is that model, that famous super collectible, you know, Les Paul.
The first electric, you mean?
It wasn't the first electric, but it's the holy grail
The electric guitar.
of electric guitars.
Rock and roller.
Yeah.
I just don't remember what the name of it is.
Yeah. Anyway, somebody brought this in its case, and it was like
Stratocaster?
gold. It had a gold finish to it. It just said, "Take me home." But at the same moment, a shipment came in, Fenders, and the first of the Fender Jazzmasters were in that shipment. And I took one look at that guitar, and it was love at first sight, and phew, that was it. Now here's a little rock and roll history for you. We all know Rock Around the Clock, right? You know, Blackboard Jungle, you know, that's the theme song. Fran Beecher did not play guitar on that record. It was a guy named Danny Cedrone. And I believe that his solo, one we've all heard thousands of times, we know by heart, is the most famous rock and roll solo, copied by other guitarists like myself. at that particular time. Danny Cedrone gets the credit, not Fran Beecher. There, did I straighten out that musical history for you? Thank you so much.
Progressing further here, we talked about a little bit here about you.
Oh, right, Go-Go Girls.
Oh, yes, the Go-Go Girls, yes. Oh God, I really wanted to know about that, yeah.
I live in Pennsylvania, and my little town had 250 union groups in it. That's a lot of groups. I mean, registered with the union, 250. Because I doubt if we even had 30 or 40 places to play, you know, in the whole area, even outside of my town. This isn't even in consideration of the non-union groups, which must have been at least double that, right? So competition was fierce. And we're all figuring out, you know, how the hell can we get work? Now, I played for 12 years. I played from the time I was 18 to 30, solid. That's the way I made my living, among other things. And I tried to figure out how to compete with these other groups. I had an idea one day about, this is really shocking, about putting a dancing girl on the stage. And I remember mentioning it to my band, and I got a laugh about that. And I still wanted to pursue it because I thought there was something of entertainment value there. And I asked a couple of my girlfriends, they just laughed at me and they said, you know, that's the most humiliating thing we could probably think of, you know. Surely there's some better ways, you know, you can humiliate us. I'm working on it. And then I was forced to put an ad in the newspaper looking for a girl who could dance and who wanted to perform. And I also went to the dance studios around town. There were 3 of them. And these are places where mothers take their young girls, you know, and spend over the course of the next 10 years a couple $100,000 teaching them how to dance, and they never play a professional gig in their lives. You know what I mean? I went there and they ridiculed me. But I think it was one of the newspaper ads that I placed. I finally got just one girl who said she'd take a shot at it. And I did not invent the name Go-Go. Some other crazy son of a bitch did that. But I put the first Go-Go girl on stage. How do I know that? I played the tri-state area, and I was well connected, and I never saw anything, heard anything like this before. And then, as soon as I got that Go-Go girl in place, within the space of maybe a month and a half, there must have been a half a dozen others competing. What are you going to do? Put 2 Go-Go girls on stage. So there's a little piece of Go-Go girl history that, you know, that you could smoke on your own.
That's for all you Golden Oldie fans. There you go, on KBLC 101 Gold in Las Cruces. Again,
He can't turn it off.
Can't turn it off. So, again, progressing throughout your career here, we talked a little bit about you becoming a magician and an escape artist. And you did these Houdini-esque, death-defying stunts, being would be buried alive. You would be thrown in a trunk in a river, the classic hanging upside down in a straitjacket. I feel like I've answered my own question here, bringing up Houdini, but what inspired you to cheat death, and how real? I was cheating you with this question too. How real was the equipment, such as the straitjackets and the trunks and everything? Because there's always been a realism to what you've done.
I took great pride in the fact that all my stunts were authentic. And by that I mean that any one of us could go down to the magic shop, the local magic shop, and buy a trick straitjacket for $49.95. And that's what we get to see a lot on TV, for example. But I thought I had a number of qualifications that would allow me to do things that maybe some other people couldn't do. For one thing, I have a high threshold for pain. I don't have a fear of heights. I have good upper body strength.
I can tell.
I have a kind of penchant for, I don't tell this story too much because it's just so weird, but I try to put yourself in my place. I was a lock picker, and what I tried to do was like Superman. I tried to look, to envision the mechanism, the pins inside of locks and the tumblers when I was picking them. I tried to, as I was feeling with my picks, I was imagining, what those words were like, and stacking up this information as I went through to pick. It was like having X-ray vision. That was one of my edges, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy, but it's absolutely true. I'm also a very bulldoggedly determined person. Once I get onto something, I always used to say, if you knock me down, you better kill me, because if I get up, I'm going to kill you. And it seemed like a natural thing for me to begin to develop this. And I remember, maybe I was 15, I have a little story. Because I was not well schooled, for example, I never really had an art lesson in my life. I mean, if I actually knew what I was doing, I'd probably be pretty good at it. But I've always been, the term self-taught. And my family is very much the same way. My relatives, my father and his brothers, for example, were all musicians, all self-taught. So it's kind of a Steranko thing. I remember one time talking, I asked a favor to my cousin. His name was Bram. Tommy Bram was the best lounge pianist in the area. And I said, Tommy, I want to switch from guitar and drums over to keyboard. Would you teach me some stuff? It's my cousin. And he said, no way in hell. Tommy, I'm your blood, I'm your flesh. What do you mean, no way in hell? He said, nobody can teach the Sterankos anything. He's probably right. So, story. I knew if I wanted to be successful in the way that I wanted to be successful, not cheating at escapes, but doing the real thing, I really have to know how to pick locks. But that's a study that could take a lifetime. I didn't have a lifetime. So I went to the biggest lock company in my city. It's called Standard Lock and Key. Big store. And old. Lots of dust. You can see this stuff has been around for a long time. This guy really knew his stuff. And he was very odd. He was like a human spider, very spindly and kind of dark and swarthy. I mean, he was a character, right out of a circus menagerie. 15-year-old kid, I'm walking in. He says, what can I do for you? And I said, I'd like to learn how to pick locks. And he threw me out of the store. But don't worry, I've been thrown out of better places. And I came back the next week, next Saturday. I walked into the store. And I said, remember me? And he said, you want me to throw you out of the store again? And I said, maybe, but just take a minute to listen to me. I said, pick any padlock, combination padlock. You've all had experiences with combination padlocks like in school, right? I said, take any combination padlock that you have here and give it to me. And I'll create a second number combination that will open it up. Now, you've all used padlocks. How many combinations are there that open them up?
The one they give you, right?
One.
One.
There's only one, right?
Right.
One. That's all there is. Everybody knows that, including this guy. And, you know, he was ready to throw me out, but my challenge was so outrageous. He gave me a lock. And he gave me the combination, which worked. And I turned around for about 30 seconds, turned my back on him. And when I turned around, I handed him the lock and I said, try this number. And then he laughed at me. And he tried the number, and it opened the lock. Well, he knew, you know, that I might be able to be an ally of his in that store some way. And that was the start of my lock-picking career. I found that the challenges, after I started for a while, I had a $1,000 challenge for anybody that could lock me up in any device that I couldn't get out of. And I've got certificates from state police, from county detectives, city detectives, from all kinds of lawmen that confirm real handcuffs under real restrained circumstances that I broke out of. And that was my sort of key to fame. I broke out of prisons. I have the newspaper clippings, you know, to prove it. I was hung upside down in straitjackets. You asked me about my straitjacket. I made a deal during one show. This was a kind of fundraiser that I did. The state mental hospital provided the straitjacket. And my deal was, if they could put me in it and restrain me that I could not get out, I'd forfeit $1,000 to their fund. But if I could get out of the jacket, I'd keep the jacket, which was stamped on the front, Wernersville State Mental Hospital. I still have the jacket. Yeah. I used to do the buried alive stunt. I do that, for example, at baseball stadiums between games. I'd have 4 or 5 ball players dig right in the middle of the ball field, dig a grave about 4 feet deep, and without a coffin, just in the dirt. I'd have them cover me up, and I'd be there for 15 minutes, dying a little at a time. And I can tell you this, there was no trick. There was nothing. You know, you'd think, well, there's a little hose, there's a little shaft, there's something. They dug a hole in the damn ground, wherever it was that they wanted to. You know, I couldn't do anything. I was dressed in black, I had black riding boots, I had a black t-shirt with a silk-screened skull and crossbones on the front. I pulled a black hood over my head so I wouldn't get dirt in my ears, my eyes, and my hair. And I practiced this stunt under sand until I knew how to make it work. And I'll tell you how I did it. I created a little pocket of air. When I went face down into the grave, I did this, look. I put my head in this little pocket of air. There's enough there for about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But I controlled my breathing. I went into a slow breathing state, like suspended animation. I slowed down my heartbeat. I slowed down my brain waves. Essentially, I went to sleep in a kind of suspended animation, so that that little pocket of air sustained me for 15 minutes. And there was no air because the dirt packed on top, was absolutely as airtight as it could possibly be. And I can tell you this, the toughest thing of all was controlling panic. Because it's a terrifying thing. You have no idea what this is like. The first thing is this: the weight of the dirt is terminally oppressive. Because we're talking about, what could be, maybe a ton. The weight of that dirt is so heavy that I couldn't move a finger. Quite literally, I couldn't move a single finger, couldn't move anything. The weight was pressing so hard on me. Another thing, and you may think that this is not necessarily important, I experienced a blackness and darkness that I had never known before. You think you know dark when you turn the lights out? Believe me, you don't know what the hell dark really is until you're in the bottom of a grave covered with a ton of dirt. And then there's the heat. My body heat was cooking me alive. As soon as I was covered with dirt, I was like in my own furnace. And I began to perspire. And every time I do this stunt, I quite literally would be soaked from head to foot because I was cooking. And then came that interminable wait of 15 minutes. But as you can see, I'm still here.
And as you can see, one of the bridges between that profession and to comics was, fun fact here, the character of Mr. Miracle from DC Comics is based on this guy right here.
All right.
Did Jack Kirby call you up and say, "Hey Jim, I'm going to base this guy on you"? How did that go? What happened?
I knew Jack from his work my whole life. I was reading Captain America as a kid. And loved Jack and loved his work. And I don't know how much you know about my work, but I think I started at Marvel with Strange Tales 151, with a cover that Kirby had penciled. In other words, I started by collaborating with the king at the top and worked my way down. That takes talent. Dedication.
Jim, I see a few artists in here at the convention, and something that you also said, it was a huge accomplishment at Marvel, and it's very tough for a writer to also accomplish this, but to write.
Can I?
Oh, sure.
Can I answer that in a minute? Let me just tell you the story.
Sure.
Let me finish this. So often when I'd be in New York, Jack lived in Long Island. I'd go out and have dinner with the family. I'd do magic tricks for the kids, earning my keep. Absolutely terrific people. If you went to see Jack, you'd be embraced by the family. You'd become one of them. They were Jews, and they treated you warmly, like you were always a part of their family. It's just the most wonderful thing ever. But anyway, Jack moved out to the West Coast. Every once in a while, he'd come back to do some business and see some relatives and so forth. And this one particular day, I knew Jack was in town. I contacted him. And I said, "What are you doing for dinner?" And Jack said, "I don't know, maybe having it with you." I said, "Well, let's meet at this restaurant downtown, and we'll make a night of it. And along the way, I asked Jack this question. It's kind of changed the comic world in a certain way. Something that always baffled me. Every comic book company had their token magician. Like Fawcett had Ibis, and Timely had Blackstone, and DC had
Zatanna.
Zatara, really,
Zatara, well,
the father. And I was puzzled as a kid. And up to that point, I asked Jack this question. Magicians pull rabbits out of hats. There's nothing dramatic about that. But why haven't any of the companies created an escape artist? I mean, this is dangerous life. These are things that, we're talking about, drowning or burning or, there's a lot of pain involved. Personally, I'm covered with scars from head to foot from that period of my life, quite literally. And Jack pondered the question for a moment. He said, I don't know, I can't explain it. Now here's a guy who was responsible for the creation of, dozens of characters. Why didn't he do it? He couldn't explain it. Why do you ask? He said. And that's when I began to tell him about some of the stunts that I had done when I was a kid. Things that I performed that were treacherous and were dangerous and were life-threatening. Particularly those underwater, because there is no second take. You're either out or you're drowned. It's as simple as that. And Jack's ears pricked up. I started to tell him some of the stuff. And about the tools that I created. Remember I said I was self-taught? Well, I applied that. And if you know a little bit about my work, you know that often that work is described as kind of out of the box or somehow separated from what the mainstream is doing, because I have a different approach to things generally. And I did the same thing with magic, with sleight of hand, for example, exact same thing, and I did with escapes too. And Jack began asking me a series of questions about the escapes, and I was very candid with him. And I said, I did a magazine years ago where I revealed a lot of this material. I said, if I can find it, I'll send it to you. And when I got home, I sent it to Jack, and that was the end of it. 6 months went by. I'm sitting in Carmine Infantino's office. Carmine was the president of DC. And he's got his feet up on the desk, and he's smoking an illegal Havana cigar that's at least a foot long. And we're talking, DC, and particularly Carmine, trying to romance me, trying to pull me away from Marvel all the time. They wanted that feather in their cap. They wanted, one of their key guys to jump ship and come over to DC. He never got around to it. That's another story. And Carmine started to chuckle. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, what you don't know. And I said, well, why don't you tell me? And he reached into this desk drawer and he pulls out this piece of paper and he scales it across the desk. It's a cover proof to Mr. Miracle #1. And he says, that's you, kid. Now, if you're wondering about the backstory, DC could never actually admit such a thing because they'd be liable. They'd have to pay me some kind of residual, if it was based on my career. But, do you know Michael Chabon and his Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay? About an escape artist who became a comic book artist? How many of those guys do you think are around? That character is based on me. Michael's escapist character. Every escape artist, comic book escape artist, is based on my escape career. And for the record, no, I never got a cent from any of those sorts of things.
I want to bring up two more points here, and then we'll open the floor up. Number one was when you were at Marvel, you said this. It was unprecedented. And again, I noticed I see some artists and writers in here, and I don't think this has been done since, Jim. But not only did you write, you also penciled, and you inked, you colored, and you also lettered. Is that right? And were these guys over at Marvel kind of worried at first, like, oh, can the kid take all this up? That's a lot of responsibility.
Well, the interesting thing about that was that I really had 3 full-time jobs. I was an art director at an ad agency, 8 to 5. I was playing in a rock and roll band 3 to 5 nights a week, sometimes location gigs out of town. That's a full-time gig. And then I had a comic book a month to do, so I was stretched pretty thin in those days. What was the question? You really wanted to know that?
Oh, just were they worried about you, undertaking all that?
I was a little worried about it myself at that point, but I found this to be the case. I was really making a lot of money as an art director at this agency. I was making this kind of money. When I got in the comic book business, and eventually something had to give. And I got out of the ad business, and eventually I stopped playing when I was 30, but still in the comic book business. And this is what happened to my income. My income level was up here. It's dropped. Finally, comics were peanuts. Peanuts. I'll tell you the thing about advertising. You go on those photo shoots, where there's lots of material. Somebody's got to take that stuff home. I never got an automobile out of it, but believe me, I got some good stuff along the way. But comic books were rock bottom, absolutely rock bottom in terms of payments. Why the hell would I do it? It was in my blood. I couldn't help myself. I didn't do it for the money. There was no money. I did it to make a personal statement. Unlike almost everybody else who was there, who were collecting paychecks on Friday, most of the time, my contemporaries were old-timers. They had done it their whole life. They'd done everything. I mean, they were just, kind of on the treadmill. But I came in with a different sensibility. And I did not do this. I did not come in to show people how it could or should or would be done. I was just telling stories my way. That's all. Simple as that. And here's part of the difference. I can't help putting a line down on a piece of paper that doesn't have a design capability to it. It does something. I can't help it. I can't put down a bit. It's like, do we have musicians? Who plays? Anybody? What do you play? Guitar. Okay, well, I was going to make, but it's true with guitar too. I was going to make a correlation to brass. You hear kids practice, playing, and they play the most awful notes. You can't sing it because but eventually, with some dedication, those notes become really perfect. And am I right about this? Confirm this. After a while, you can't play a bad note. You simply can't do it. You can't blow it. You can't, your hands, on the strings, and you can make a, F sharp 7 flat 9 without thinking about it. You don't think. Now you're concerned about presentation, not about how to finger the chord, or how to do that. So where are we?
Okay. On my end here, last thing that I'd like to bring up, and then we'll open the floor up here. I'm really hoping you can shed some light on this.
Wait.
Oh.
I just remember where I was going with that.
Okay. It's his panel, baby.
After a while, I said I was a designer. Well, I brought all my design sensibilities to the page. I couldn't help it. It's like music. You can't blow a bad note. I couldn't lay down, something that wasn't me, which is, what I hope would be relatively good design because that's my background. And I also brought the study of cognitive science to my work. This is one of the key things when you look at my books. You'll see that it is riddled with the principles of cognitive science. I don't have enough time to tell you about it right now, but that's one of the things. How did that happen? Well, in the advertising business, like if we're launching a product, we do studies to see what's the best color, what's the best shape of the product, what's the best size, what's the best wording, what's the best, so we know what the public responds to. Comics never have done that. I brought that into comics. That's what you see when you see my work. You see cognitive science at work. One other really important thing, I learned to draw by copying my favorites in the comic books. But my storytelling, my narrative sensibility is completely defined by the cinema. I knew this even as a little kid. I mean, I could read comics and, I could chuckle, maybe, but when I went to the movies made me laugh out loud and cry. It did things that comic books could never make me do. Why is that? It's because the storytellers, the directors, the writers in movies are much more powerful, they're smarter, they're better. That's where I learned my narrative approach. I learned it from Hitchcock and Wells and S.H.I.E.L.D. and all the great directors, including my all-time favorite, the guy who influenced me the most. And I bet you would never, ever guess the single film that educated me the most, more than any other. Take a guess, anybody. Go ahead, Jack. Fill up. They're your crowd.
Citizen Kane.
Casablanca.
Good
I
guess.
was going to mention something with Orson Welles, but I'm drawing a blank.
Good guesses.
Something by Chaplin.
Mildred Pierce. Now you were close because Michael Curtiz directed Casablanca in much the same way as he directed Mildred Pierce, except I think he did more directorial, more Curtiz things in Mildred Pierce. But that's the film that educated me the most. I just thought I'd throw that out there to surprise you. But yes, all of those people were my teachers. And that's why my work looks different from everybody else's. It's because I come at it in a different way. The mistake that comic book people made back in the early 30s was they took the tenets of the newspaper strips, and they took those rules, those regulations, and they transformed them into comic books. They made a terminal mistake because, look, this is, even at best, full newspaper page, is this big, you can see every panel at once. Here, this is newspaper experience, right? In your peripheral vision, you see everything. This is the comic book experience. See how vastly different the two of them are? That's where they made their mistake. They never considered this aspect of a book. And even the very best guys in the business never knew that simple thing. If you look back at their work, you'll see that they're using a comic strip approach for the most part. So those are a couple things that set my work apart from others. Go ahead, Jack.
Jim, I noticed we got about a little less than 10 minutes, so let's open the floor up here to the panel. I'm going to bring the mic down. Are you ready for some questions from the audience? Jim, what do you say?
Keep it clean, you guys.
I'll bounce you out. All right, so I'm going to put the mic down here. Anybody that has a question, please feel free to come up.
Really could take it from the floor if you just stand up. And Jack, did you get this? Did you get this group to check their guns at the door?
I did, all of them.
Thank you.
Like I said, I will bounce you out.
What's your favorite experience? Like, if you look back, is there a particular comic that you feel is your most influential, or what's your favorite experience in your past?
My favorite experience wouldn't be that Bob Kane incident.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, I wish you would. I don't want that carved on my tombstone. I prefer to keep his name as far from mine as possible.
You don't know the Bob King story? Oh.
I will tell you something I regret. Okay? There's not enough time. I'd love to tell you the story of how I got into Marvel Comics. It was a completely outrageous piece of work. And by the way, I'm on Twitter almost every Sunday at 10 o'clock. Type in Twitter and the word I am Steranko, and you'll get to our site. Come in and mix it up. And some really sharp guys in there. And occasionally we cover things like we're talking about today. What I regret. Some of my experiences with Stan, because he was my mentor, put me on the map. I was just a dumb kid that walked into his office, although it was a hell of a day. Matter of fact, if you can muscle whoever's coming in here next out, I may just tell that story at the end, at the tail end. But I learned very quickly not to tell Stan what I was going to do with my pages. And I learned it the hard way, because if I said, hey, I have this idea, Stan would say, just do it like Johnny Romita, or like Jack. Do it like Jack. And, if I were that good, I'd do it like those guys, but I'm not those guys. I'm only myself, that's it. That's all I can give you. You either take it or leave it. It's as simple as that. So, did you know I had this reputation for being late in comics? Didn't hear about that. I'm glad. I was never late. Never. I never missed a deadline, but I'll tell you what I did do. I realized pretty early on, when I bring my pages in like on Monday, and they were due like on Thursday, this process of tinkering. They tinker with my pages. They begin to change things, move things around, and it wouldn't be the story that I brought into them. And you know that I worked on that story to create certain things, and they used to take them away. Well, it doesn't take much of an IQ to realize that I could have jumped over that whole process, which I did by bringing my stories in at 3:30 on Thursday. I still remember this one moment, with great affection, by the way. I had been fired by Stan. I'll get to that in a moment. But when I came back, I said to Stan, there are so many things. Comic books are just hitting the tip of the storytelling or narrative iceberg. I mean, comic books in the late 60s were the same as they were in 1930. There's no difference. They've never grown. There were a few things along the way, but damn few things. And I said, comics are forgiving. You can do almost anything. So Stan said, well, why don't we do, something different, if that'll please you. And I said, how about a romance story? And Stan what have I spawned? I said, let's do a romance story, because all of them are done in the J. Scott Pike style. They all look the same, they feel the same, they have the same ambience, everything's the same. And they don't have to be, they shouldn't be. And Stan said, all right. So he wrote a story just for me called My Heart Broke in Hollywood. And because I colored my own books, tried something different. I tried to create an emotional sense with these panels. Instead of creating realistic images, I tried to take them into areas that were capable of changing the reader's attitude by using color. Color changes our attitudes. Everybody knows that. So in the course of this, you know, I might have colored the characters blue, or maybe orange, or purple, you know, because I was going for a specific color effect. And I remember when I took the coloring in to Marie Severin, who was Marvel's top colorist there, and I was walking into Stan's office. I was about maybe 20 feet away. And I heard the background. Oh my God! I knew Marie had seen my coloring, but it was 3:30 in the afternoon. That's how I got my reputation. But anyway, this is what I regret. You know that guy you see on TV, Stan Lee? You know, that's really him. Honest to God, he's not making that up. It's unbelievable, isn't it? But that's really Stan. He's one of the most charming, personable, and kindest people I had ever met. Just to give you a quickie story, there was an artist that sued Atlas, Timely, Marvel, back in the 50s. And I wanted to know a little bit about it, and I asked Stan one day, I said, can you tell me about this guy? And I gave his name, and he said, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He said, no, I don't want to talk about it. I said, Stan, that was like 25 years ago or more. The guy's been dead for 20 years already. He's not going to give a damn. I would just like to know a little bit about it. He said, no. No, I don't want to speak ill of the dead. That's the kind of guy Stan is. Okay, you got it? So when I bring these ideas to Stan, he blanch. I remember having a big argument with him. The first issue of S.H.I.E.L.D. had a 3-page silent sequence. Comics have had other silent sequences before, but they were full of thought balloons and captions. You call that a silent sequence? No. No. Here, this is a silent sequence. I stripped every damn word out of it and told the story completely in images, S.H.I.E.L.D. #1. And it was about Fury breaking into this enemy fortress where you had to be quiet. And I got the idea from a film directed by Jules Dassin called Rafifi. That's where that idea came from. And Stan looked at it and he said, we're going to get these books back from the retailers. I'm going, you gotta be kidding. Why? He said, well, isn't it obvious? They'll think they're misprinted. There are no balloons on it. I said, Stan, house of ideas. Come on, then we had one of our arguments. And this is the part I regret. Stan was my mentor. He put me on the map. And I had many bitter arguments, you know, about these things that I wanted my readers to experience, and I had to get out of my system. I'm a very confrontational guy. You wouldn't know that. I mean, you know, I used to be, you know, I'm just a sensitive guy right now. And we had some very, very bitter arguments, including one where he actually fired me. I've never seen him angry. Imagine Stan Lee being angry. Inconceivable, isn't it? He was so angry he fired me. You can't fire me, I quit. But I regret that. And here's a little caveat. We were having dinner in San Diego one time, Stan, his wife, and me, and friends, and some other people. And Stan leaned over the table to a guy who was next to me. And I actually heard him say this, and I confirmed him later. He said, you know, I always thought of Jim as the son I never had. So that's one of the things that I do regret. Moments, I've had a lot of moments. And they're essentially pretty good ones, you know, like this one that I've had here today with you guys, making friends with people that I've never seen before, having a good time telling stories with you. These are all part of your lives, and now we're all part of the same, what I call the brotherhood of henchmen.
Is that not the fastest hour ever? Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Steranko.
Thank you so much. Thank you. How about a hand for our promoter, for Troy? Troy?